Okay. Hi, it's good to be back after a 2 week break. And unfortunately, last week I wasn't able to kind of join, participate the way I usually do, even though I know it was the special Rosh Chodesh program. Unfortunately, I was sick with Corona, and thank God, Baruch Hu Rofei Cholim, I'm feeling a lot better and back on my feet again. So this week, I was trying to think of a character that was somehow connected with Tu B'Shvat. And I was kind of just, racking my brains. How could we connect one of the heroes and villains from Talmud and Tanakh to Tu B'Shvat? And what kept coming back to my mind was the trees from the beginning of creation, the trees from the story of Adam and Chava, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And I was like, okay, from here maybe we can derive some inspiration from those who first encountered the trees and had to actually take care of the trees and l'shomra u'lavda, and then afterwards they had to toil the land. And this began with the story of Adam and Chava. So I decided that we would begin tonight with Chava's development, her story. And so we were going to begin with Perak Aleph, and we're going to look at the development of her character amidst the story of creation. Now, in the story of creation, it's a mystifying story. Many questions come up. We will not be able to look at all the different pieces and parts and philosophical questions that definitely occupy us when reading this story. We're going to touch upon, really focus in with our camera lens on Chava. So it's interesting when we see in Parak Aleph the story of creation versus Parak Bet, and there have been tons of literature written about that, about how the creation is described in the first parak, and in contrast and comparison to how creation is referred to in the second parak. We're going to start with how we see where the creation of woman is in Parak Aleph. So if we look at the first source on our sheet, Breshit Parak Aleph, we see here that Hashem says, "Vayomer Elokim la'asa Adam betzalmenu kidmutenu." Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Vayirdu bidgat hayam uva'of hashamayim uvabayama. They're going to rule the fish and the birds and the cattle. They're going to rule the whole earth. Chaf Zayin, where is woman created? Vayivra Elokim et ha'adam b'tzalmo. God creates man in his image. B'tzem Elokim barauto, in the image of God he created him. Again, many questions are coming up. We have to ignore them, unfortunately, and keep plowing forward, focusing on Chava. Zachar u'lekeva bara otam. Male and female, he created them. So this is very hard to understand. What does that mean? Male and female, he created them. What was Adam? So Rashi famously explains what happens. How are they created? And he asks that question. He says in Parakbat, which we're going to look at in the next source, it says, "Vayikach achat mitzalotav," the famous story of God taking one of the ribs for man and creating from that rib woman. So he explains, is there a contradiction between the fact that they were first created as a male and a female entity together, and then later on she's created from him? So he explains that the Midrash says, "Shebaru shlei partzufim b'briya rishona v'achar kach chilku." According to the Midrash, he created man at first with two faces, and only afterwards does God separate them. And according to the Pshat, Upshuto shel Mikra, according to the Pshat, really what's happening here is that here it's telling you that the two of them were created on Yom Shishi, on the sixth day, and it doesn't explain to you how. And later on in the next parak, that's where we're going to have an explanation of how woman was created. Okay, so here Rashi is offering two explanations. One is the Midrashic explanation that man and woman were created as one entity. And the second way, to the pshat, more of the simple meaning of the text, is that here it's mentioning their creation, and later on in the next parak, we're going to understand exactly what happened in that story of creation. So if we go now to the second parak, so it keeps jumping. I don't know why it keeps jumping. Sorry. I don't know why it keeps jumping. I'm gonna just make it small again. For some reason it keeps jumping. I'm sorry. Apologies for that. In parak bet, we see here that Hashem, if we look parak bet pasuk yud, ויאמר השם אלוקים, לא טוב היות האדם לבדו, אעשה לו עזר כלכתו. Okay, so this is again the first mentioning of when woman is going to be created. And how is this structured in God's mind? Hashem says it's not good for man to be alone. I'm going to make him an ezer kilagdo, which we can loosely explain, and we'll look into that, a fitting helper for him. Okay, and then after that, we start to see Vayitzer Hashem Elokim mil ha'adama kol chayat hasadeh v'et kol ha'of. Right after God explains that man should not be alone, we start to see the formation of the beasts and the birds and the naming of these creatures, and only afterwards do we see the creation of Chava. So if we look at the explanations for what is this referring to in Pasuk on Pasuk Yud, that Sforno is coming to teach us, that Lo Tov Hayot Ha'adam Levado, well, it's coming to explain that you cannot Lo Yusag Tov HaTachlit HaMechuvan B'dmuto V'tzamo Im Yitztarech Litaseku Atzmo B'tzarchei Chayav. The purpose of humans on earth cannot be achieved. And this purpose is that he's meant to reflect upon this divine image that he was given, if he needs to occupy himself with fulfilling his many multiple needs. So therefore he needs someone that can help him with that. All the menial tasks of the daily life on earth, it's very hard to accomplish when one person is working alone, as I saw this week, this past week, unfortunately, when I was in my bed for the week, suffering from the corona, my husband was running the show by himself, and it's very hard. So here, practically, this Forno is explaining that practically it's very hard for someone to be focused on their spiritual aims when there's so many menial tasks, and therefore he needs to share them with a partner. Ezer Kelekto explains what is it referring to him, that this Ezer, this helpmate, is going to be equal to him, and this helpmate is also going to have this divine image reflected within her. Because this is essential for him to know what precisely his needs are, and so that they can meet each other's needs. Therefore, she needs to be just the way that he is, the way that he's created. She needs to be created as well. And when it says the word kilegdo, it's referring to that someone there's an equal playing ground there. There's an equality between them. And therefore, if you're trying to explain a relationship that's of unequals, then you use the words ole v'yored. One goes up and one goes down. But when you have the word leged, it refers to equality. Leged is bekav yashar, like on a straight line. And when he comes to say at the end, but it wasn't worthy that she would be completely equal to him. Because then, therefore, it wouldn't be worthy that she would be able to help him and to do chores for him. So therefore, what happened, the word it says kilegdo, not legdo, but kilegdo, which means approximately, to somehow tone down this equality. Okay, so as we go on in the text in Psukim Yutet and Chaf, we see the creation of the animals and the fish. And in Pasuk Chaf, Vayikra Adam Shemot L'chol HaBehema L'of HaShamayim, he gives them names, and he gives them the names, and he categorizes according to each one of their nature all the different species in the world. U'la'adam lo matza ezer kelekto. But from all of these animals, he wasn't able to find his mate, his equal. So this is here the story comes in. God causes this great slumber, this stupor to fall upon man, and he takes one of his ribs from him, and he closes the skin beneath, and he closes up the cut. פסוק כ"ב, ויבן השם אלוקים את הצלע אשר לקח מן האדם לאישה, ויביאה אל האדם. And he builds, okay? And we're going to note the word vayivel, that God builds, not the words vayitzar, that he created, that he made, that he built. He's building from something that already is existing, something that he took from them. If we look down into the sources, into what Rashi explains, ולאדם לא מצא עזר, ויפול השם אלוקים תרדמה, that this stupor that falls upon him, he's explaining that when all of these animals were brought before Adam, and each of the species, there was a male and a female, and he says, everyone here has its mate, and I don't have my own. And so therefore, after Miyad Vayapel, so like immediately God brings the stupor upon him, and he takes from him from his sorry, sorry, I just got a little confused. He takes from him from his ribs, and like this word from his ribs, mitzalotav. The word is referring to his side, as we see the word sela could refer to side in reference to the Mishkan. And they were created with two faces, which were two sides. Vayskor, but he closed up the place where it was cut. Vayishan, Vayikach, and he slept, and he took it. And the reason why God does this is so that while he's sleeping, he does that. He takes from him so that he shouldn't see this piece of flesh from which she was created, and therefore she might be despised by him. He might look down upon her that he like had to give from himself for her to be created, or that she was created from his own flesh. And Rav Shimshon Rafal Hirsch explains here, he explains beautifully that the creation of woman is not like the creation of man. That the man is taken from the ground. That's where man is created from. But Hashem lakach tzad echad shel ha'ish ubana oto l'isha. But Hashem takes a part of the side from man and builds a woman. Kiviyachol ha'ish lichlak l'shlayim v'chelak acher livna l'isha. Like it's as if man is divided into two, and one of his parts is built into a woman, and so therefore it doesn't say the words vayivra, vayitzer, vayas, the words connotating creation, rather building. She's more sophisticated. This is a development. This is repair. This is even a better version. At one point, this was one creation, and now it became two. Right? And so the sages, they refer to this, all of the different special parts that women have. Her voice is special, her character is special, her temperament is special, her great spiritual maturity is special. As we see at different places in Chazal, that idea that also women have this bila yetera, this deeper understanding. This is all connected to Yitzirat ha'isha, the creation of woman. Notzra migufo shel adam. She's created from the body of man. Shekvar chash, hirgish v'chai. This man was already feeling, was already alive. Beligud leish, in contrast to man, shegufo lukach miladama, that his body was taken from the ground. So it's very interesting that Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is explaining how woman's creation is even greater because she was already created from man, as opposed to man who was created from the ground. So she was created from a greater substance, right? The man that rather than what man was created from the ground. And so therefore she has all of these special qualities, and all these special qualities that sages throughout the Gemara refer to women, all comes back to this point of her creation. And so here, if we go back up to Pasuk Chavbet, that we see here that he brings her to man, he brings her to man, Vayomer ha'adam zot hapam etzem me'atzamai ubasar mibsari lezot yikare isha ki me'ish lukacha zot. So Pasuk Chav Gimel is coming to explain. At this time, she's saying, she is from my bones, she is from my flesh, and from here she is going to be called a woman. And Isha is the generic name for all women to come, because me'ish lukachazot, from man she was taken. על כן יעזוב איש את אביו ואת אמו ודבק באשתו והיו לבשר אחד. And so therefore, hence, a man leaves his father and his mother's house and clings to his wife, and they become one together. Okay, and so the Radak explains, Chizkune explains here, what does it mean? Where is he? It says Vayivia el Adam, that he brought her to Adam. Where did he bring her from? Right? After all, she's part of her husband's rib. She's literally right next to him. Ela diber katuv al machshavato shel Adam. Right? It's talking about the thinking of man, how he's viewing her. שבתחילה כשראה אותה חשב ליבו שהובאה לו כשאר הבריות, וכשהרגיש בעצמו שהיה חסר צלו, אז אמר עצה מעצמי. So in the beginning, her sudden appearance, it was viewed by Adam when he awoke from this deep sleep, and he thought that God had brought her to her just the way that God had brought the other animals to be named. But only once he noticed that he was actually missing one of his ribs, that he realized, and this rib had formerly been a part of his own flesh, then he realized that this is his second half, and that's why he explained that she's bone from my own bone. She's from my flesh. And here's okay, and Radak explains when he says, "Vayomer zot hapam ki b'pam rishona k'shevia kel lefanav habehemot v'achayot v'afot lo ra'a behem bat zug." That in the beginning he says, what does it mean zot hapam? That in contrast to what happened before, that God had brought all of these animals before Adam, and he was naming all of them, and he brought the beasts and the birds to be inspected. He had not seen among them anyone that could be his match, that could be equal to what he was. And none of them matched him in any of the physical features, and not even in any of the intellectual capacities. But now, aval zot hapam k'shehivia elav, that when Hashem brought her to him, ra'a v'kirha keme'atzmo mibsaro hayta ki ra'a ota b'tchulato u'v'dmuto. He suddenly recognized that he had found a truly compatible mate. And it wasn't just by the way that she looked, but he was aware that it was from his body. And so therefore she must be his compatible mate. And he saw like b'tchulato v'dmuto, that in her characteristics and in her imagery, and when he physically felt himself that he was lacking something, and that it was that's when he realized, again similarly to what we just saw with Chizkuni, that she had been taken from him. And Radak says, "Vayu lebasar echad," when they come to unite, klomar basar echad v'guf echad, כי האישה הראשונה נבראה מהאיש מעצמו מבשרו, והנה היו לבשר אחד, וכן יהיו דבקים לעולם זה בזה כבשר אחד, ומשניהם יתקיים המין. So Radak explains, and this is a beautiful way to kind of conclude how we see the creation, that at first we see the creation of Parak Aleph, that they're created together, that they are this one entity. And now we see here that God actually takes from man, and when man realizes that she is his Ezer Kenegdo, that she is his soulmate, right? He realizes it when he feels in his own body, in his own flesh, that something is lacking, that she has come from him, and now she has become a separate entity. And according to Rav Hirsch, an even more sophisticated version of him, right? And she's standing before him, and now they are meant to reunite through matrimony once again to become basar echad, klomar basar, that they become v'guf echad, they become one body again when they unite in marriage. And so therefore they should cling to one another as one unified unit, not necessarily one entity body, but now two separate entities that come together as one, and through both of them the entire civilization will be sustained. Mishlehem yitkayem amin, that the species will be joined together, and through this they will the world will be completely sustained. Okay, so as we just saw from the beginning, at first they were one entity. Chava emerges and becomes her own person in her own right, and then man and woman come together in this the joining of this union of matrimony to be reunited in a way, and cling together in order to sustain the species and the world. So where do we see that Chava is actually given her name? So it's very interesting. I didn't bring all of the psukim to see, but after the story of this creation, we see it in the prakim, um, that the story right after this is the story of the snake, the story of the Nachash, and we're not going to get into that this week. The story of Bezrat Hashem next week, we'll discuss the Nachash, the serpent, as his own character, but the story of the Nachash intercedes and appears here, and the first sin of man appears, and the whole story, that we're not going to get into. And right after the mentioning of this whole story, um, and the punishments that they receive, that this is where we see the appearance of Chava's name. We don't see, it's not necessarily chronologically that this is the moment that she's given her name, but it appears here after, Hashem says to Adam, Hashem says to man, that you are going to return to the ground that you are taken from. Ki mimena lukachta, ki afarata ve'al afar tashuv. You come from, afarata, you are from the dust of the land, and you are going to go back to that dust. And after that comes in Perek Gimel Pasuk Chav, Vayikra Adam Shem Ishto Chava. He calls his wife by the name Chava, Ki hi hayta em kol chai, because she was the mother of all of the living. And right after that, that's when Hashem creates for them the garments for their skins, for Adam and Chava. So what does this mean? What is the name, the special name that she's given, that she's granted? At first, we see her as just only Zachar v'Nekeva barautam, as connected, by the hip, right? Connected to, Adam, and then we see her created as a separate entity, but she was only called Isha, a woman, until now, and all womanhood is called after that. Isha is what is the Hebrew word for women, for woman. So now all of a sudden we're starting to see the development of her character, that she receives a name, that Adam, he beforehand, he calls all of the beasts and the fish and all the different species of the world, he grants them their names, and that also is a reflection upon the special position that man has in this world, that this world was really created for man, that man is able to call each species by its name. And here now it's Chava's turn. Chava is being called her name, and the name that she's given is Chava because she is Em Kol Chai. So what is this referring to here? What is so special? And why is she called Chava here? So Rashi explains, one second. One second. Okay, that Chava is saying Nofel alashon chaya. Okay, that the Chava, that the words, the letter Vav and Yud are interchangeable, and so it's referring to the language of Chayat, of the word, like Chai is life. Shemachiyeh et velotea, that she sustains, she gives life to her offspring, and so therefore that's why she's called Chava, because she is the one that, from the word Chaya, that she's giving forth life. And Chizkuni brings in, a connection here, which is also interesting, to Devorah, and he explains Devar Acher, im em kol chai lashon gvura, that she's the mother of all living. This is the language of gvura, of courage, as referred to in Sefer Shoftim. It's that it's a compliment to Chava that she is like the human mother of the human species, and Devora, the shofetet, the judge, Devora, she also refers to herself in similar terms in the beginning of her song when she's thanking Hakadosh Baruch Hu for her victory that she has with Barak in Sefer Shoftim Parakeh Pasuk Zayin, and she refers to as herself Shekamti Em B'Yisrael, that I came up, I arose as the mother of Israel. So here, the Chizkuni is drawing a connection between the universal aspect of Chava, that she is the mother of all life, which is this language of Gvura, because when we see that word again, Em Kol Chai, we see it Em B'Yisrael, Shekamti Em B'Yisrael, is in connection to Devorah, that she is like the mother of Israel on the national level. Radak explains that when she's brought before him and he gives her a name, he's giving her a name, the same way that he gave names to animals and to birds and fish. This is the name, though, that he calls her Hashem HaMiyuchad. This is the name. וזה השם שקרא לה הוא השם המיוחד. This is the special name that's given to her, כי השם הכללי כבר זכרו באמרו לזאת יקרא אישה. Because her generic name was already, as we mentioned before, is called Isha. But now here, he's giving her special name. It's possible that we could see that after they ate from the Eitz Hadat, from the tree of knowledge, he calls her this name because שבאכילת הפרי ההוא נתחדשה להם תאוות המשקל וידעו שיולידו. So once they ate from the fruits of the tree of knowledge, their sexual desires were intensified, and they knew that they would therefore give birth to children from after this renewal of the sexual desire. And so therefore she's called Em Kol Chai, the mother of all children. And also another way is to explain uperesh chai, that you can also explain the word chai as from the word medaber, from speaking, from the word machveh. And so that's another way to explain. And ve'amru ki kara Chava velo chaya, he calls her Chava, and he doesn't call her chaya with the yud, lafrid beina uvein chayot hasadeh, in order to make a separation between her and between the rest of the animals. Now, so that's more of a positive way of looking at the name of Chava, that Chava is someone that's bringing life, and the comparison that Chizkuni brings to Devorah as the mother of humanity. And Alshich brings in more of a negative way of seeing this name of Chava. And it says, Vayikra Adam Shem Ishto Chava ki hi hayta em kol chai, because she was the mother of all of humanity. And he explains, Hine al shahayta em al kol chai, because she was the mother of all humanity, it's worthy that she should be called chaya. But that's why it needed to say hi hayta, that she was, because Mila ro'eh yomar ki hi em kol chai, right? If she was, that it would be worthy that she would be called, that she is em kol chai, not hi hayta, but that she is, right? The reason why she's not called chaya, because now she's called Chava to show what's missing, because in the beginning she was hi em kol chai ru'uya likarei chaya. She was the mother of all humanity, and so therefore she should have been called chaya. Ach ata hi em kol met, but now she is the mother of all of the deceased. Shaba'avura kulam yamutu v'yashuvu al afar. Because of her, death came upon the world after the sin that she brought about, and so therefore v'yashuvu al afar, everyone will return to dust. As we mentioned before, that this pasuk is coming after Hashem saying to Adam that you come from dust and you're going to return back to the dust. And so therefore, the Alshich is explaining in a more of a negative light is that she should have been called Chaya, but the reason why it says he hayta em kol chai, she was the mother of all of the living, not he em kol chai, that she is in present tense, because she became the mother of all of the deceased, because as a result of her actions, she brought death upon the world. Okay, um, and again, we're not going to go into her sin in this year. Now, Chava, until now, we saw, just to refresh where we're coming from, that we saw her as one entity with man. Then we saw her creation, that she becomes a separate entity, and then a reunion with man through matrimony. And then we see that she is given this name and this role as the mother of all humanity. But now, here we see in Perek Daled, interestingly, that we see Chava not just as Em Kolchai, the mother of all humanity, which is the universal aspect of Chava, as the first woman of the world, but we see her as a mother to her children. And we see that she gives names to her children. And Rav Yehuda Rak brings a really beautiful idea that I want to look upon today with you in terms of how we see the evolving of Chava's character through the names that she gives to her children as the mother of her own personal children. In Perek Daled, before we were just reading the end of Perek Gimel, and Perek Daled explains V'ha'adam yadat Chava ishto, that man knew his wife Chava, v'tahar v'teled et Kain, v'tomer kaliti ish et Hashem. Okay? V'tosef laledet et achiv et Havel, v'yi Hevel ro'e tzon, v'Kain haya ovel adama. If we look at Perek Daled, these are the first psukim, Pasuk Aleph and Pasuk Bet. Okay? That Adam knew Chava, his wife. She became pregnant. She gave birth to Cain, and she named him Cain. And soon we're going to look into the meaning of that. Pasuk Bet explains that she then bore his brother Hevel. She continued to give birth to his brother Havel, and then Hevel, we see his occupation and Cain's occupation, and then the rest of the main section, the quantity of psukim refers to the story of Cain and Hevel, which we also will not go into, but the story that we know about how Cain and Hevel bring offerings to God, each of them reflecting their own personal occupations, vocations, and Hashem accepts the sacrifice of Hevel and not the sacrifice of Cain, and eventually, even though he was warned, Cain kills Hevel. Okay, that's the crux, not the crux. It's like the most amount of psukim are dedicated to that, but the last psukim that we see of that same parak, of Perek Daled, are psukim Chav Daled through Chavav. We see once again, Vayeda Adam od et ishto. Okay, this is the end of that parak that I just explained. Adam once again knows his wife. She gives birth to a son. Vatikrat shmo Shet, she calls him Seth. Ki shatli Elokim zera acher tachat Hevel ki harago Kayin. And we're going to explain after what that's referring to, that name. Uleshet gam hu yulad ben vaikrat shmo Enosh. Then Shet gives birth and also has a son and calls him Enosh. Az huchal likro b'shem Hashem. And that's when man began to invoke the Lord by name. Okay, so that's the beginning and the ending of the parak. So Rav Yehuda Rak explains that usually this Perek Daled, is seen as the story of Cain and Hevel, but he claims here that Chava is really the main character of this story based on the literary structure. Whereas we might have thought that Cain and Hevel are the main characters because the most amount of psukim are devoted to them. When we look at the literary structure of this Perek, the first two psukim and the last two psukim, look at the beginning of the parak and the end of it. The end goes back to Chava giving birth once again, and she gives birth again after the death of Hevel. It would seem more logical that we would have the birth of Shet after the birth of Cain and Hevel, before we go into the dynasty of Cain, which comes also, if we have the whole parak before us, I apologize that we don't have the whole parak before us, that we see also the dynasty of Cain is in Perek Daled. The beginning and the end of the parak, they share similar ideas and language. Both open with Adam knowing Chava and Chava giving birth and then naming a son. The first and the last two verses are the outer framework, which determine the main subject. And the main subject Rav Yehuda Rak is coming to explain, is that it's about Chava and her births. And by comparing them, Chava and her births, the beginning ones to the last one, we can find the key that unlocks the message of this story, right? And so if we look at the first part, at the namings, we see that she gives birth to Cain and she gives him his name. What is Cain explaining here? So what does Cain mean according to Rashi? So she says, I've gained a male child with the help of the Lord, or the English translation. Kaliti ishat Hashem. Kaliti from the word kinyan is to acquire. Okay, liknot in modern Hebrew is to buy. So Cain al shem kaliti ish. Rashi is explaining here. את השם, כמו עם השם, כשברא אותי ואת אישי הוא לבדו בראנו, אבל בזה שותפים אנו עמו. So what does that mean, איש את השם? I acquired a man with God, et Hashem, together with Hashem. So Rashi explained that she's trying to say with God. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created me and created my husband Adam, he himself created us. Aval bezeh shutafim anu imo. But in this creation, the creation of Cain, we are partners with God. Okay, so that's how she sees the birth of Cain, and according to Rav Yehuda Rak, Chava is putting herself on, as if to say, on par with God, God, the creator of the whole world. That they are joint masters of this child. They created this child together. She is seeing herself as a partnership with God, and this and then in Pasuk Bet, we see Vatosef laledet et achiv et Havel. She continues to give birth to his brother, to Havel. And here we see that Hevel, he's not given any sort of official name with an explanation. It says that Hevel is his name, and we know that Hevel means worthless, right? So Malbim explains Hevel haya beinei rak tosefet al ha'ikar. He's really like an addition to what the main thing was really all about, because the Bechor, the eldest child, was the main name of the game. And Rambam, he brings in Rambam that explains that the way that they used to see in those times, that one that worked the ground is really what was desired in the eyes of God, and they would היו קוראים בני אדם על עבודת אדמה והיו שונאים רועי צאן, right? They saw that this vocation of working the land was much more worthy, and they would despise those that were shepherds, which is what Heva was. As we saw also later on, that Mitzrayim also, ki tovat Mitzrayim kol ro'ei tzon, that they also had this hatred towards shepherds, because the shepherd would go from place to place, but someone that works the land, he would stay in one place, he was settled, and so therefore they saw this as something that was greater. And so so therefore they would specify the Bechor so that he would work the ground, and this is what was like desired in the eyes of God. So therefore, Leidat Hevel haya tosefet etzla. So the birth of Hevel was like an addition. Lachen, Vayhi Hevel ro'et tzon, that Hevel is a shepherd, וזה גם כן טעם קריאת שמו Hevel, כי היה Hevel אצלה, וקין היה עובל אדמה מצד בחורתו. And so therefore it's possible that that's why she called him Hevel, because he was worthless to her, really wasn't worth that much. And Cain was the one that worked the ground. He was the worthier brother. He was the one that was, the greater brother. Okay, so here we see that in this, but with the birth of Cain and the birth of Hevel, we see that Cain is really the main one here, and that Chava sees herself in this place of being of equality to God, this place that she's a partner, this partnership with God. And then after the whole story of the murder of Hevel, after the Psukim in Perek Dalet, we come to the end of Perek Dalet, and we see that the name that Chava gives her, that gives Shet, comes from a different place. Pasuk Chafei, Vayida Adam od et ishto. Adam knew his wife again. Vateled ben vatikrat shmo Shet. She gives birth to a son. She calls his name Shet. Ki shatli Elokim zera acher tachat hevel ki harago Kain. God has given me another offspring, and she uses the word zera here, from the word seed, tachat Hevel, in place of Hevel, because Cain killed Hevel. Okay, so here we see that in contrast to the name that she gives to Cain at the beginning of Perek Dalet, and the name that she gives to her third son, to Shet, at the end of the story, which according to logic, we would have thought it would have come immediately after, that the three sons would have been mentioned, but that's why Rav Yehuda Rak is coming to say that it's in the beginning and at the end to show that it's the framework, the literary structure, the framework of this parak, to show that Chava is really the male character of the story, and her character develops through the names that she gives her children, through the experiences that happens. Um, we see that through this story, there's a development in her consciousness. She goes from someone who has this competitive acquisitiveness, right? She acquired Cain, and she's Ki'ilu showing off her creative power in the beginning by saying, like, now, like, et Hashem, with God, I created this. And that's her focus. To hear when she speaks about the birth of Shet, she's saying, God gave me this seed. There's submission here, there's recognition, there's gratitude that Hashem is giving at, that Hashem gave him to her. And this change is really hinted at in her words, that she says that Hashem gave this seed to me in place of Hevel, who was killed. And Hevel, he was really worthless to her in relation to Cain. And with time, he became precious, more precious in her eyes. But once he was taken, she was able to recognize his worth. And she recognized that the one who took him from her is also the one who gave her Shet, right? The same one, the God, Hashem, that took Hevel from her, gave her Shet. Hashem latan v'Hashem lakach. Right? This reminds me of the story as well of Beria, the message that she gives to Rabbi Meir when their children, when she finds that that both of her sons have died, and that whole story, and the purpose of her story is that she says to Rabbi Meir, these children don't belong to us. These children, Hashem gave them to us, and Hashem took them. And so here she's also shat, comes from the word Hashem gave this offspring to me. Not that I created this child with him, because really on a physiological level, we can understand in the beginning where Chava is coming from. She's saying to herself, I have, this baby has developed inside of me. I have thrown up for 9 months. I have carried this child. I have gone to the bathroom throughout the night. I have really been involved. When I was created, I just, God created me out of the rib. I just appeared. but I really was part of this. And once again, there's that same danger as well when we leave the midbar and we come into Eretz Yisrael and we start planting the land. That same danger, we can also say, I'm a partner with God in what's going on in the land, in planting the land, and I could really make that mistake and think that me and God are on this equal partnership going on here, and it's really a huge part of, and partners means equality, that I've planted this land, so the labor belongs to me. We can understand that mistake that Chava had made originally with Cain. But after she goes through this, after she has this experience, she understands um, that she understands that her role in the giving birth is qualitatively different than the mastership of God. That if it wasn't for God, then the heartbeat of that child wouldn't be there on the sonogram. If it wasn't for God bringing rain, it doesn't matter how much we work the land, nothing would grow. And that recognition, that submission that Hashem gives and Hashem takes, we see here through the naming of her child. and the development of her consciousness. And I think just to end off that Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch brings down this idea that Rav Yehuda Rak was explaining. He brings it down beautifully in his words. V'hivalel bela rishona. So at the birth of her first child, chashva Chava latzva tchila v'al chalka b'holadat haben. Right, in the birth of her first child, she's thinking about herself first and about her part in the birth of her child. But afterwards, meanwhile, she has all of these trials, these very deep trials and tests that come about upon her, these difficult things that she goes through. Shuv Elhi omeret kaliti. So once again with Shet, she doesn't say kaliti, I acquired him. Ela shatli Elokim. Rather, she says, God gave him to me. Shuv Elhi ro'a bo ish. She doesn't see him as a man, ela zera, rather as a seed. Karka v'yesod la'atid chadash. How beautifully he says that this is ground and a foundation for a new future. Right? The word shet is also to give, that Hashem gave to me, but shet is also from the word mushtat, which means the yesod, the foundation. Shekel, sha'a shekail harag et hevel, hu lo rak harag et hevel, ela harag et atzmo, veharas et atid doro. So here that we saw that when Kail kills Hevel, so the line of Hevel is destroyed. But it's not that he killed, it's not just that he killed Hevel, but he also killed himself, Kail, by killing Hevel, he also killed himself, by destroying the future of his generation. Bihivaled Shet, but at the birth of Shet, Yesod umish'al, the word shade is also foundation, what something is lean upon. As we see in Tehillim, that the word shade is explaining about the structure, the foundation. Lital Yesod chadash l'tikvat ha'eloshut. By the birth of Shet, we see the foundation upon which there's hope for mankind. Because what happens is that after coming from Shet is Noach. The generations that came from Hevel, there were no generations. He was destroyed. And the generations of Cain were wiped out in the Mabul, in the flood. But Shet, he was this new hope that upon him there was the foundation for new hope. There was the foundation for growth of mankind in here. And so through the naming of her children, of Chava, who's that universal Em Kol Chai, the mother on a personal level, through the names that she gives her children, we see that development of Chava, of at first mistaking, right? Mistaking her role, not understanding her role in giving birth to her child, and only once her son is taken from her does she realize the great power of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem can take and Hashem can give, and that Hashem gave her Shet, and Shet is, with his birth, he is this karka v'yesod la'atid chadash, he is the grounds and the foundations for a brighter future, from where Noach comes from, and Noach is the one that needs to bring about the renewal of the whole entire world. And so this week, when we speak about Tu B'Shvat, and when we think about that, the sin was in regard the relationship with the tree, without getting into the details of the tree. But here we see the story of Chava. We see her growth in that she calls her son Shet, and Noach comes for him, and she realizes that he's just a seed, right? That and from a seed, this is where we can plant anew. That yes, Chava, Adam and Chava, they had that first sin in regarding to the tree. They were taken out of Gal Eden, but through their son Shet, they were building another seed. They were building another hope, from here to grow. And so here, through this whole story, just to recap, that we see the development of Chava, that at first she's combined one entity, and then she becomes her own separate entity, and she receives her name, and from there she gives names to her children, and through the names of her children, we can see the growth of Chava.
Thank you.
Thank you.